Hey guys, this is Adam Blackstar, and I wanted to talk for a couple minutes about a question that I hear posed fairly regularly by believers. And that question goes something like, why do atheists talk so much about God? Why do atheists care? Why do we debate and argue and try to show believers that their beliefs are irrational? Why are we not out just enjoying our carefree lives of wickedness and debauchery? Well, I can't help but think that the question itself is just a little bit disingenuous, but I suppose in some cases that it may be that people really are just that sheltered and naive that they would think that that's a good question. It's not a question they've thought through very well, at very least. Many times I will answer that question, but they're not interested in my answer. They're interested in their answer to that question. And so no matter what I say, they posit their own answer. And most of the time that answer is that I just hate God. That the only rational explanation for why I could be debating with them is that I hate God and that I'm out there doing the devil's work. So to that I often ask, do you hate Darth Vader? And oftentimes they will just refuse to acknowledge that question. Perhaps they don't see why it's relevant. Perhaps they recognize the relevance all too well. Do you hate Darth Vader, believer? And we both can recognize that hating Darth Vader is pretty ridiculous. I mean, Darth Vader's a fictional character. He's a beloved fantasy villain. No matter how dastardly Darth Vader is, we don't hate the guy. He's a cultural icon. We love watching him in the Star Wars movies. He's a great character. So, of course we don't hate Darth Vader. But let's take that a step further. And let's pretend that there are people who believe Darth Vader is real. A real guy who's out there on the Death Star. And that Darth Vader is a really wise person. They believe this. And they believe that Darth Vader's worldview is the ideal model for what a society should look like. And they are out there actively working to make our world reflect Darth Vader's worldview as much as possible. And they're doing this by propagating their belief in Darth Vader and their subscription to his worldview. They're doing this by indoctrinating their children to believe in Darth Vader and to believe that Darth Vader's concept of morality is actually the best possible concept of morality. And by passing legislation that would transform our world to look as much like Darth Vader's idea of our world as possible. Now, it still seems like a ridiculous notion, but I'm asking you to pretend that this is really happening. It's a thought experiment. And it's clear to see that something that started off as a ridiculous notion quickly becomes pretty serious. And I think that we atheists and Christians would be able to share some common ground on this. And we would probably both be out there engaging with these people who believe Darth Vader, who are propagating Darth Vader's worldview. We would be out there engaging them, we would be out there debating them, we would be out there trying to show them that their beliefs are irrational. We would be out there trying to stop this from happening and put as many roadblocks in front of them as we possibly can. At no point would we ever make the leap to hating Darth Vader, because we don't believe in Darth Vader. We know Darth Vader's fictional. There's no reason to hate someone who's fictional. Yet there are a myriad of other reasons why we would engage with these people. Hate is not one of them. When I stopped believing in God, it would have been great if I could have just awakened and the whole world would have awakened with me, and that all beliefs in the absurd would have just been gone. But that's not what happened. It was not a Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz type experience. I did not click my heels together and wake up in Kansas. On the contrary, I realized that I was still in Oz, and I realized that Oz was a lot darker place than I realized it was. I'd never had realized before just how deeply rooted religious belief was in our culture. Stupid, I know. Religion is not just a belief that someone practices. It's not just this innocent tradition. That's not to say that it can't be, but here in the United States, it's definitely not. And I don't know of anywhere that it is. Here in the United States, where you have people who hold these beliefs, and they are out there, like in the example that I gave you of Darth Vader, they are out there propagating these beliefs. They're out there indoctrinating their children with these beliefs, and they're out there trying to get legislation passed to force these beliefs on our entire society. This is not some innocuous, benign belief system. It's fairly malignant from my position, from the position of atheists, who looks at this from the perspective of reason. We're not willing to believe things just because that's what mom and daddy told us was real. Just because we want to believe it. Now, I don't want to speak for all atheists, because some atheists do believe for logical reasons. But I'm saying the atheists that I know, and certainly myself, we tend to hold beliefs because they're justified. And we look at Christianity and we see beliefs that are completely unjustified, that are completely irrational. And the best that believers can offer us is quoting a book when they have not in any way explained or demonstrated why that book is a reliable source for anything, for truth, for morality. And I've had, they point to prophecies, so many evidences that have been debunked countless times, and I'm perfectly willing to debunk any of them. The effect of religious belief is not only something that I can observe now in our world, but it's something that I can observe in myself. Because I was raised in a Pentecostal church. There was never any point where I chose to be religious, or chose to be Pentecostal, or chose to believe. That didn't happen. When I was a child, it was stated regularly by adults that Jesus is going to be coming back soon. Now, what is soon? Soon means it could happen at any moment. Next year. Or when you're asleep that night. And it was kind of frightening. because I wanted to be ready and I wanted to be a good Christian, but, I was always worried that I wouldn't quite measure up. But nonetheless, I wanted to be ready. And when it's constantly being drilled into you that this could happen at any moment, and you're a kid and you don't have the experience or the knowledge to really ponder that in any meaningful way, you just accept adults at their word. I didn't realize that people have been saying that the Jesus return is imminent for a few thousand years. I didn't realize that my grandparents were saying that. All I knew was this is adults are saying this, so it's going to happen. And we had people who would prognosticate things based on, I have no idea why, but the year 2000 was like, as it was approaching, it was seen as this big milestone. Again, I don't know why. Is it because God likes multiples of 1,000? And 2,000 is just a nice round number? Is it because people believe that Jesus was born in the year 1 AD? And for some reason, 2,000 years was like what he earmarked to return. I don't know why people chose that. But as I grew up, I looked at the year 2000 approaching, and I thought that is probably going to be the point where things are going to change, where our world is going to start becoming much more chaotic. Maybe the tribulation is going to start. Jesus will come back around that time. Bad times coming, basically. Then there was the threat of Y2K. And then when that all passed and nothing happened, there was 9/11, the World Trade Center terrorist attack. And again, we all began to think, well, this is the beginning of the end. That the snowball's rolling down the hill, and it's just a matter of time now before this is all over and the rapture takes place. And so growing up with this mindset, you can see how this would affect how I thought about my future. Because I didn't think about my future the way that probably most people did. I didn't think about, well, I'm going to have a career and I'm going to get married, I'm going to have kids. I mean, I'm not going to say those things didn't occur to me, but in my mind, those things were no more likely than the rapture taking place. I really legitimately believed, or I hoped, I remember hoping that there was enough time after I got out of high school that I could find a good job, that I could get married and maybe have a couple of kids before the rapture happened. I remember thinking, the rapture is going to happen and I'm going to miss out on stuff. So I hope that God will just hold off a little bit. And these were not fleeting thoughts. These were actually what I believed. So I think about all the things that I could have been if I just had a different mindset. If I didn't have adults telling me that science was a religion and basically a conspiracy to undermine religion, it makes me wonder what I would have. Would I have set different goals? Would I have thought differently about my future? Would I have paid more attention in science class? I'm very interested in science now. If I didn't have these silly beliefs ricocheting in my head like a pinball game, would there have been more room to think about things that actually mattered? To worry about my future instead of worrying about whether I'm going to make the rapture? things that seemed rather pointless to me then. Now I look back on and I realize that that was, there were so many opportunities. And I'm not sitting here now with a sob story like I'm on Oprah saying this is what religion did to me, because I actually feel like I've had a good life thus far. And I feel like it's just going to get better from here forward. I feel actually very lucky, and I'm very happy with how my life has gone. But at the same time, I can definitely look back and I can see how I was held back by my religious beliefs. I can see how I was handicapped by them. Everything that I did, it was almost like I was a spectator in my own life. Because I depended on God to make things happen for me. And I was taught to believe that if I'm out there trying to make things happen for myself, that it's just too easy to get outside God's will, and that I shouldn't be doing anything, that I should just be letting God do it on my behalf. Maybe you've heard the old expression, if God is your copilot, you're in the wrong seat. I think it goes something like that. In other words, what it's saying is that God should be the pilot, you should be the co-pilot. And that's how I tried very hard to look at things. Like I was interested, when I dated women, it was always like I didn't want to push too hard because I was kind of sitting back and watching and thinking, now God, is this the way to go? Never mind the fact that I would not consider anyone outside of my own religion. I was frankly scared of people outside of my own religion. And it was reinforced to me again and again, you cannot be unequally yoked with unbelievers or people from other religious backgrounds, that I needed to find somebody within my own religious faith. And it's amazing, it just amazes me when I talk about this, that I actually held this belief that everything I believed was right, 100% right and on target, and that everything that everyone else believed, to varying degrees, was wrong to varying degrees. And I believe that simply because that's what was told to me, because that's how I was raised, because that's the only thing I was exposed to. It just amazes me that that's the way I saw the world. And this is the effect of religious belief and religious indoctrination. So this is why I debate with believers. Because religious belief, again, it's not some cute, benign little thing that doesn't affect me. It affects me. It affects everyone. But most importantly, it affects those and infects those who are being filled with this propaganda before they're equipped to actually evaluate any of these claims. That's who it really hurts the most. And there are numerous other examples that these beliefs undermine morality. They undermine what's natural and the natural state of human beings. The belief that LGBT is immoral simply because a book says that it is. That it's unnatural despite all of the evidence to the contrary. And the people who are actively out there trying to suppress LGBT because a book told them that their God finds it offensive. And it's amazing to me that this God is not capable of speaking for himself, that he requires his minions to go out there and to try to legislate these people into oblivion. And somehow that's seen as morality. So yes, these irrational beliefs are harmful. The assertion that science is religion, that science and organized religion are somehow equals, and people actually believe this, and I hear this from people that I know. Science is a religion. Scientists are just men, coming up with theories and things they don't know. And the people that make these claims are completely ignorant to what science actually is and to the scientific method and what actually sets science apart from religion. That religion is making claims with absolutely no rational basis behind them and believing those claims in spite of all of the conflicting evidence, and not even perhaps believing them, but using this thing, this abstract concept called faith, which seems to say that belief itself is not really relevant, or is not the most relevant thing, but the most relevant thing is that you go on pretending as if you do believe, even when you don't. The old fake it until you make it expression. And I've actually seen children who are homeschooled. I've actually witnessed what that looks like. Not to say that it's all the same, but in this one case, I saw a parent going through their science lesson with the child, and the child was reading from the curriculum, and it was just horrifying. I wish that I knew that I could remember the exact quote of what this child was reading from this curriculum, but it wasn't anything like what anyone would actually consider science to be, other than maybe the most fundamentalist Christians. But as they were reading this science, I guess maybe it was a textbook, instead of actually reading the explanations for why, the actual scientific explanations for phenomena, it was just substituting God in there. And the child was reading something like, I just remember the phrase, when God created the mountains. And this was in the science curriculum. And I actually overheard this when I was still a believer, and I thought, how unfortunate that this child is going to grow up and be completely ignorant of science, whether you believe in it or not. How can it actually serve any good purpose to be completely ignorant of something? And it divides people. Religion divides people. You look at the thousands of different religious sects, and you look at how people are divided, they're at war, they're committing violent acts against one another. Maybe not Christianity quite as much, or anywhere near as much as other religions. Islam. But yet, the division is real. All these rifts and all these labels between people. It's a shame that those things have to exist. And it's a shame that they exist for no better reason than religious dogma and irrational beliefs that are propagated by brainwashing children. This is why I debate. In closing, I would like to ask this question. Why do theists debate? Why do believers debate with atheists? If believers really took their Bible seriously, if they actually read Romans 1, then they would have to arrive at the conclusion that there's really no such thing as atheists. Romans 1 puts all of the non-believers into one of two categories. Either number one, we're people who actually do believe in God, but we just have such a desire to be evil and wicked that we have suppressed that knowledge to the point that we live in this delusion. Yet at the same time, it says the evidence of God is clearly seen. The evidence of the Creator is clearly seen to the creation. So if that's true, we really know that God exists. So there would be no point in debating with us if we actually agree with each other. There would be no point in defending your beliefs against us if you realize that we actually have those same beliefs. The best way to respond to us, if we truly do, if that chapter is actually speaking the truth about us, the best way to react to us would just be to smile and kind of wink at us and to just turn around and walk away. And that would get under our skin because that would just reinforce all the things that your Bible says about us. On the other hand, Romans 1 goes on to say that there are some who have ignored God to the point that God has allowed them to be turned over to a reprobate mind. In other words, we can no longer perceive God. We can no longer hear God's voice. We can no longer see God. That we are actually, maybe perhaps then we actually are atheists. But not by our choice, by God's choice. So if that's the case, then once again, there would be no point in debating with us, trying to convince us of anything, or trying to defend yourselves against us. So I ask you again, why do you do it? What is the point? You can continue to fight the war against us through legislation, through demagoguery, but as far as to actually try to convince us of something or defend yourselves against us, there would be no point if you believe your Bible. So I'm curious if I'll get any arguments in the comments below. Hopefully I've answered the question of why atheists debate Christians, and why we actively seek out those confrontations, and why we actively go out and attempt to demonstrate the irrationality of those beliefs. And I'm going to cut that off here, so I appreciate you listening, and leave me a comment, and I will be coming out with another video here pretty soon. Adam Blackstar on Facebook, Adam Blackstar on Twitter. Hope to see you on social media.